Hey YouTube, it's GX Ace here. Today I have something pretty cool. I have an exclusive look at the 7Artisans 35mm f2 lens for Leica M mount. So this lens is pretty interesting. It's a 35mm f2 lens for the Leica M mount. So this is kind of a follow-up to 7Artisans' previous M mount lens, the 50mm 1.1. So this lens is made in the style of a traditional kind of rangefinder film camera lens. It's small, compact, it has a focusing tab, the hyperfocal distance scale on it. It's kind of a lens made to emulate the classic kind of Leica lens look and feel. One update from their previous M mount lens is that the aperture ring has clicks this time. So the build quality on this lens is surprisingly good. When I took it out of the box for the first time, I was pretty surprised at how heavy it was. It feels really good. It's a good weight. It definitely feels substantial and not cheap. So I'm actually shooting this video right now on the 7Artisans 35mm f2 in 4K, so you can kind of see the quality that you get from video with this lens. So optically, this lens is a sonar formula with 7 elements in 5 groups. Given that it's a sonar type lens, it definitely has a classic feel to the images, similar to old Zeiss lenses, hence the sonar name. The lens is actually surprisingly very sharp. I was a little surprised, especially coming from the 50mm 1.1. This lens is almost extremely sharp. Like it's a very, very sharp lens, especially in the center. The corners are surprisingly good too. They're just like a hair softer, but they're still very sharp, wide open. It's kind of an interesting combination of like the classic sonar design and modern sharpness. So this lens has a tendency to flare if you're shooting into kind of bright light sources. I had a couple photos where it was a little annoying. It kind of just washed it out in a kind of an unpleasing way. But the lens actually does flare pretty interestingly, depending on how you're using it. So if you want to see right here, this is kind of a flare test of the lens. So you can see it gives a nice kind of haloing effect and some kind of interesting flares, which I actually find pretty cool for this lens. I was actually surprised how much I liked this. So this lens does exhibit some pretty obvious barrel distortion. It can be cool. I personally like barrel distortion on lenses because I'm really obsessed with anamorphic lenses, which are known for a ton of distortion, but I kind of like that kind of classic feel to at least video. In addition to that barrel distortion, there's also a decent amount of chromatic aberration if you're shooting like directly against some super high contrast situation. I've also noticed that some of the chromatic aberration was yellow. It's actually kind of interesting looking, in my opinion. It's something different that I've never seen before, and it might have to do with the coating on the lens, I'm not sure. Bokeh on this lens it's pretty interesting. It does have the classic kind of sonar feel where kind of the edges of the circles near the edge of the frame kind of flare out a little bit and are a little softer on the side near the edge of the lens. You actually get a decent amount of like field curvature where closer to the edge of the lens, the bokeh gets much smaller, which I think is a really interesting quality to this lens. The field curvature on this lens and the way that it renders the bokeh almost feels like MS optical lenses, specifically the MS optical 28mm. This lens has a pretty decent amount of character as well as being super sharp, which is a pretty awesome combo. was actually pretty surprised by this lens. I was expecting, honestly, for it to not be very sharp because the 50mm was not very sharp at all. That lens, however, was a 1.1, which is pretty hard to make sharp, but I was kind of expecting a similar softness to this lens too, but I was completely surprised. This lens is very, very sharp. The bokeh looks much better than the 50mm 1.1. I really didn't like the bokeh on that lens, but this lens definitely feels a lot better. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. That was my thoughts on this pretty interesting lens. So keep an eye out for it. In the future, it should be coming out in May, and if you liked this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more stuff. Thanks!